Hello and welcome to the TakeON Productivity webinar, Doing the Most with What You Have. My name is Julian Andrews and I'm the publisher at TakeON and I'm going to be your MC. So let's start off by introducing our presenters, Danielle Backer and Jez Smith.
Hi everybody, good morning.
Hello everyone.
Right, Danielle is TakeON's productivity expert. Over the last 2 decades, she has implemented and driven continuous improvement, or CI as it's called, across industries including automotive, aerospace, medical, oil and gas, steel and dairy food. And that's over 3 continents as well. Meanwhile, Jez is TakeON's head of partner development. And put simply, there's no one better to design and deliver a program or a solution for improving your business's performance. Right, housekeeping first. We're using an online panel to communicate with you, which should now be displayed on your computer. If you can't see it, it's probably minimized or sitting at the bottom of your screen. To expand it, you simply click on the double arrows at the top of the panel. If any time you want to ask us a question about something, if something occurs along the way, feel free, just type it in, enter it into the box at the bottom. And at the end of the session, we're going to have plenty of time to answer these. But before you leave, we want you to fill in our quick survey. It's going to help us to understand what you took from today's session and how we can improve for the next one. We'd really appreciate you taking some time to fill it in. Okay, everything's completely confidential. Shh. The only people that see your comments or questions are the presenters, the engineer, and myself. So feel free to comment on what's important and ask as many questions as you need to. Now remember, we're recording this session, so there's no need to take notes. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy. Now, when I said relax and enjoy, that's only if we're not at one of those interactive parts. And this is the sign that you'll see when I want you guys to get your fingers to do the talking. When you see this slide, you'll have about 10 seconds or so to pick an answer from our multi-choice options. And what better way to make sure that you guys are all actually awake is than to do a poll right now. So here's our first one. Are you using, have you used, or have you considered using some sort of a continuous improvement CI program or project? Okay, people, let's get those buzzers talking. There we go. What kind of a response are we going to get? No CI program currently, but considering using a CI program, or have you used it in the past but not currently? The responses are starting to come in. Yeah, we got about 50-50 here. Come on. Oh, no, it's shifting again. 33. All right, I'm going to be closing the panel in 3, 2, 1, go. Some really interesting results here. Okay, it looks like about 36% of you are using a CI program. And about another quarter, no CI program, and you haven't considered it yet. Okay, Jez, what does this tell us?
Interesting stuff. Well, thanks very much, Julian, for such a lively start. It's interesting, isn't it? Research would back those statistics up absolutely across the world, in fact. And it looks like productivity is pretty popular at the moment and has been for a number of years, because research would tell us that 40 to 50% of organizations are already or will be focusing on productivity in the coming 12 months. That's a lot. And when we say productivity, actually there's other ways of describing it. Lots of people are talking about continuous improvement. Others talk about efficiency drives, quality circles. Terminology like Lean and Six Sigma is just commonplace now in everyday business language. And all of those have got some element of productivity or innovation or continuous improvement. But just because there's so many people actually involved in rolling this stuff out doesn't mean to say that they're getting the results that they actually want. So today's session is all about 3 key things. First of all, we're going to be talking about the rate of success. So those that are doing it, how are they getting on? The second thing is about drivers of success. So what does research tell us that is actually helping those organizations that are doing it well? And lastly, most importantly, is our approach. So what is the TakeON approach, and why is it different? As you know, TakeON is a program for improving business performance. So it gets people talking about what matters most. So if productivity matters most to you right now, then you're in exactly the right place. And as Julian said before, it doesn't matter where you are on your productivity journey. If you've not started yet, then maybe this can give you a bit of a kickstart. If you've already started, then great. Maybe this can help you get the most out of what you're already doing. So I want to kick off with Danielle, actually. I'm going to hand over to her. Danielle, Julian alluded to, is probably one of the most experienced and qualified Lean Six Sigma black belts in the country here in New Zealand. In fact, probably in Australasia. It's a great honour for us to have her with us and to working with us at the moment. So, Danielle, from your experience, why don't you tell us about what are people doing and what sort of success are they having right now?
Thanks, Jez. So first, before we go into that, let's take a look at the history of productivity. If we think back to the early 1900s, it all started with Henry Ford. He was focused on producing the first affordable motor vehicle. His first car left his revolutionary assembly line in 1908. He introduced and used his theory of scientific management of waste and standardization. He recognized and understood that he was needing to ramp up the production and ramp it up quickly. So less than 20 years later, he produced the 15 millionth vehicle. 15 million vehicles produced in less than 20 years. In terms of productivity, I'd say that's a really sharp curve. But it didn't stop here. Following Ford, other methodologies have been introduced over time. If we take a look from Henry Ford to Charles Deming in the 1950s in total quality management. When I think about where I was in the early 1990s, I was working with NASA and then the automotive industry. And when I think back, although I didn't have the experience to really understand Lean and Six Sigma at the time, they were actually very apparent in NASA, in the space industry, Six Sigma, a lot of data analysis, and really a lot of statistical control, but it wasn't necessarily called Six Sigma. Then we take a look at automotive industry. Due to the high production, of course, Lean was very apparent. So then I shifted to the aerospace industry in 1996, and at that point, we really began to integrate a lot of the Lean and Six Sigma to really work together and not only reduce the waste, but grow the businesses and grow the technologies and advancements. So quickly saw them evolving through the industries and countries. As I worked with Lean and Six Sigma teams in production and service areas, I typically saw the same challenges. What about the long-term sustainability? So I wasn't really surprised when John Cotter in 1996, in his book Leading Change, he talked about 70% of transformation efforts fail. 70%. 12 years later, research by McKinsey and Company, that showed that, you know what, the failure rate remains the same. It's still 70%. So when I look back to 2008, at this time I had shifted to Africa. I was working with the oil industry. Thought, okay, Africa may be a bit different. But the reality was I was applying similar principles, although it was different countries, different languages, similar base methodology, and once again, you know what, we saw the same challenges. We just didn't get the long-term sustainability. Don't get me wrong, I'd experienced a lot of success using Lean and Six Sigma, and there has been huge success across different companies and industries. But we all seem to see the similar challenges. So what's it boil down to? We're continually being asked, we need to do more with less. But actually, so what we want to talk about today is doing more with what you have. So our challenge in this webinar is to explore what real productivity progress might look like in today's organization, and how can the TakeON approach help you achieve that? So what really is the stumbling block? Why are businesses not maintaining the gains?
And that sounds like, to me, like a perfect opportunity for me to interrupt with another poll. Okay, people, wake up, get those fingers moving. Here we go. In your experience, why do you believe it is often difficult to maintain these gains? What is the biggest cause of failure? Why does it often just not stick? Okay, so 4 options on your screen in front of you now. Okay, I want you guys to input. Is it that the money runs out? Is it that we're simply limited by technology? Is it that people are not engaged? Or is it simply that we just don't have the right tools? Okay, I'm getting enthusiastic responses coming through already. Okay, let's see what we guys are doing. Come on, you guys can do this. I know it's early in the morning, but you can manage it. Okay, I'll tell you what, this is fantastic. I think the question was too easy because you know what? 3, 2, 1, close the poll now. The results, 100%. This has never happened before. 100% of you are in agreement. The people simply are not engaged. How did you guess that? Jeez.
Brilliant. Thanks, Julian. Yeah, and we would absolutely agree with that. It just proves everybody at least read the invite, which is excellent news. We would agree, and I guess most productivity experts would agree as well. It's actually engaging people in the process, which is probably holding us back. In fact, Peter Hines, who's based up there, maybe considered the modern-day grandfather of Lean, he put it quite nicely when he talked about, despite often promising early results, the research shows that at least 50% of business improvement programs are actually doomed to fail. Without improving the company culture and behaviors, no amount of lean tools and techniques will be able to achieve sustainable business improvements. And we totally agree with that. We actually think it's much more about the human system than it is about a software system or a process or a procedure. It's the human system that needs to drive it. And I guess all this stuff around Lean and Six Sigma, logically, it makes total sense. But logic alone doesn't change behavior. Logic alone doesn't drive engagement. In order to change behavior, we need to connect our people emotionally as well. So what might it look like if actually we could achieve that? What could we achieve if people were engaged in the productivity journey as well? Well, this is a great opportunity for us to talk about one of our TakeON case studies. So this is a Malaysian high street bank, 5,000 employees spread across the country in different branches. Traditionally, really strong business performance, but at the same time experiencing low to sort of fair employee engagement and customer satisfaction scores. Now, the interesting thing about this client was they actually had been on a productivity journey or a transformation program for 2 to 3 years before we came along. But once they started to use the TakeON tools and methodology, we started to see some very different sort of changes. And one thing I need to mention here is that when we started working with them, the TakeON program was about improving the customer experience and engagement primarily. Fast forward 12 months, and here are some of the results that we started to see. Effectively, we were looking at 4 different result categories. We were looking at efficiency, quality, customer experience, and employee engagement. And look at those top line scores. Card approval time, personal loan approval time, both reduced significantly, almost cut in half. As far as quality is concerned, a huge reduction in error rates, down 93%. Just imagine what sort of an impact that had on the financials of this organization. And while we were making huge gains in those sort of areas, what happened to the customer experience? Well, customer retention goes up, so customers are happy about it. And as far as employee engagement is concerned, that goes up up by 21 points. An incredible shift, an incredible shift. So the question needs to be asked, so how did we do that? Yep, that's the question that everybody would put forward. And I guess if you were to ask one of the senior executive team, this is what he said made the biggest difference. The most important thing that we did was to change the conversations happening across the business. And not just once or twice, but ensuring that these conversations were happening week in, week out. Actually, in fact, what did we do? We got everybody talking about what matters most, what was most important to them. So maybe it's not so much about doing the most with what you have. Maybe it's about doing the most with who you have. At the end of the day, from a TakeON point of view, we firmly believe that it's people that are the most powerful factor in improving your performance. So just imagine, all right, instead of investing all the pounds and pence in expensive external specialists, imagine if you were to turn every single person within your organization into a continuous improvement consultant. A continuous improvement consultant that's totally focused on improving what we do, how we do it, and are excited about it at the same time. How cool would that be? Now, we've outlined 2 quite different approaches here, a traditional approach and then a TakeON approach. So, Danielle, why don't you help us sort of understand what would be the difference between these 2?
Okay, thanks, Jez. I think actually in that conversation you may have just made me redundant. Maybe I'm no longer needed.
Not at all.
But the reality is what we want to do is we do want to make everybody in the organization internal continuous improvement consultants. So let's take a look at a typical improvement project. Think about the scenarios when you've worked on an improvement project and what it might typically look like. When I reflect on my 20 years of experience, regardless of the methodology, the projects tended to follow a similar pattern from start to end. Whether I was internal or external, I'd usually get a call and it'd usually start with a leadership meeting. There's a crisis. Suppliers aren't delivering. Customers aren't responding. We need help. We have to fix this now. And often this is not the first time that this problem's occurred. But ultimately, we need to understand the problem and we need to understand what's wrong. So leadership requests, and we put together a team quick, and we're going to work on fixing the problem. Hopefully, I have somebody internally to work with me so they can also learn and grow the skill internally for the experience. And leadership says, by the way, we don't have a lot of money or time, but this is critical and we need to keep this from happening again. So I get busy and start scheduling meeting rooms, get a lot of teams together, have lunches, use a lot of sticky notes, and begin to solve the problem. And you know what? The team makes significant progress. We actually are talking. We're talking across different organizations. We now understand what we need to do. But then reality hits. We're running out of time, and we need to fix the problem quick. Logically, the entire organization and the leadership knows that to make this a success, we need to engage the people. We need to engage the wider team. So we usually focus on initial engagement, but oftentimes it's minimal and short-lived. Send some people to training. Leadership's extremely bought in and focused on this, so they send emails. We have a detailed communication plan. And leadership, they tell people what's going on, but oftentimes it's what's happening to them. They may not necessarily be along on the journey. And this is usually the time, too, that they usually let me, being external, or the internal project team leader, go back to the regular job. We've got this figured out. We understand what the problem is, and we have people somewhat engaged, so it should just continue, right? Well, the truth of it is that we will see the initial up spike in performance, but once everything returns to the way it was, any gains are often lost. Then it's decided, we'll just do it later because, we run out of time, our training budget's reduced, everyone's too busy, and, our communication plan, it actually wasn't implemented. A few changes were made, but eventually everyone reverts to how it was before. And we have another big issue, so we need to move on. Then 12 months later, get a call. Oh no, we have the same problem again. The same supplier is not delivering. And then the cycle continues. Does this sound at all familiar? So, are we really surprised that nothing's changed? Whether I've been in the US, Africa, New Zealand, if I've been in production or service industries, the same challenges exist. No matter how unique the actual product or service is, people are typically the key to long-term sustainability. So as Jez mentioned, Peter Hines said, without improving the culture and behaviors, no tools can achieve sustainable improvements. So for us, the answer lies within ourselves. It's about this human system. It's not about the tools, and it's not about the processes specifically. The behaviors must shift. So Jez, how do you improve the culture and behavior?
Well, thanks, Donielle. And actually, it's a lot easier than you might think. It's not rocket science. No disrespect meant there, but it's not rocket science. It is quite simple. McKinsey would actually agree. The global study that they conducted recently, they found 3 common factors that were common for successful organizations that have gone through transformation. The first thing was about engaging everyone collaboratively within the process. So not just a project team, everybody in the business. The second thing was about accentuating the positives. So not just focusing on the problems and trying to solve them immediately, focusing on what's working as well and making the most of them. And the third thing was about building leadership capabilities. Now, our interpretation of building leadership capabilities is to lead powerful performance conversations at a team level between a supervisor or a manager and their people. So what would that look like, and what did it look like in our case study organization in Malaysia? Well, imagine for 1 minute every single person in your organization getting together once a week for 30 to 40 minutes, talking about the same business issue and how they can improve it. Imagine how powerful that would be across your business. Well, that's exactly what the TakeON toolkit enables you to do. It provides the tools and resources that support this simple conversation. And you'll see this process appear on your screen. The first part of that program is called Inform. And what we mean is informing the team about, well, why are we getting together? What are we talking about? And why is it important to us? The second step in that conversation is about investigation. So how are we doing? If we've already identified what good looks like in the inform stage, how are we doing towards that goal? And immediately we're starting to identify strengths and weaknesses and maybe even a bit of a performance gap. So the third part of that conversation is what we call Ignite, and that's all about generating ideas that we come up with to solve our issues or make the most of our opportunities. That's an incredibly empowering sort of process. The final stage of the conversation is about implementation. And so which of the ideas that we came up with in the last phase are good enough to have a crack at? And why wouldn't we have a crack at them? Because they're not huge ideas. The ideas are not about coming up with a new IT system or a whole new procedure. They're really small things that nobody else needs to sign off, that we're in control of and we can do ourselves. And very quickly, within the space of 4 or 5 weeks, you've got an entire organization coming up with ideas to their own problems, which is an incredibly empowering sort of process. Over 4 or 5 weeks, what you've actually done is you've turned every team in the business and every individual in the business into their own little continuous improvement professional. Now they're becoming an expert, and now they're becoming engaged and involved. Now let me give you just one example of how powerful this process can be. In the case study that we're talking about here in Malaysia, one of the themes, the take-on themes that we ran across the organization was called valuing customer time. And as a result of this very same process that we've just looked at there, they managed to reduce customer wait times in branches by 59% over a 12-month period. Now, just imagine the power of that on the customer experience, but also on the employee experience, because goodness me, if I can cut waiting times like that, it makes my job a lot easier. I'm a lot happier at work, and the customer's a lot happier at the end of the day. So how does it work? There's a whole host of things I could talk about now in terms of why it works. And it's a really, really simple process. But there's 2 things I want to talk about specifically. And the first thing is embedded within this model that you see on the screen now. Because the TakeON toolkit is a toolkit full of dialogue or conversational-based tools. It's the opposite of download. Why is it the opposite of download? Well, we think dialogue is much more about constructive collaboration and good communication than download. Download is just telling people what to do. If you engage people in really rich dialogue, they come up with their own ideas to create as to own. It's the opposite of training. We call it, it's much more aligned to education, if you like. And if any of you are fans of HBR, you might have seen in 2002 a great article by Groisberg and Slind in June 2012. And they wrote a piece which was called Leadership as a Conversation. And they put it quite succinctly when they said traditional corporate communication must give way to a process that's much more dynamic and more sophisticated. Most important, that process must be conversational. That's exactly what TakeON does. It provides the structure and the focus to help get your organization talking about what matters most. The second principle is all about sustainability. And we go back to that curve that Danielle showed earlier, the one that dipped off, the performance tends to dip off after initial engagement. Well, TakeON is focused at the end of that performance curve. And so maintaining momentum over time. It's much more of a sustainable approach. Every 4 or 5 weeks, every new theme tends to start to build momentum and create more and more engagement within the business. So what we've done is we've positioned a couple of approaches here, and they're really quite different. The first one, the traditional approach, is about taking one small team and giving them some new skills, putting them into the business and getting them to run activities and conversations around things like root cause analysis or value stream mapping and waste reduction, and hoping some of it sticks. And make no bones about it, some of it will stick. But remember, lots of that is just based on the logic. And what we might need to do is to take the take-on approach to build in some of that emotional engagement as well. And imagine now your teams and your managers coming together to have very different conversations, getting them engaged in the productivity journey. Groups of managers coming together to talk about real issues like customer focus, some value stream thinking, or maybe some curiosity, understanding what's really going on inside a problem or an issue. And then them managers taking conversations away to have with their team about thinking joined up, so working better together, adding customer value. How can we go the extra mile? And lastly, waste not, want not. How can we reduce waste in the organization? I don't know, but how powerful would that be, Julian?
I think, yeah, look, I'm a fan. You know that. Listen, I loved it so much I bought the company. Oh, no, that wasn't me. That was someone else. Okay, so the important thing that we're trying to talk about here is that it's always about what matters most to you right now. And that brings us to another poll. People, what do you think? And this is the last poll, so it's your last opportunity to contribute in a constructive fashion before the questions, when in fact I'll ask you to contribute in a constructive fashion again. But anyway, what is the most pressing issue, in your opinion, for most businesses these days? Is it productivity, which is what we've talked about? Is it customer service? Is it change management? Is it leadership, or is it company culture? Come on, people, last chance. Let's see you hit those keys. Let's get some responses in. Let me come over here and have a look. How are we going? Yep, come on, people, hit the buttons. Are we getting some responses? Here we go. Yep. Okay, so we'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1, go. Well, listen, people, this was a bit of a trick question, and the simple reason for that is that actually doesn't matter what the most pressing or current issue in businesses are these days, because we think that TakeOn can handle all of them. Ain't that right, Danielle?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter if your current issues are about productivity, customer service, culture, or leadership. The TakeOn approach can help you. So even though I might be focusing on productivity, what I've experienced is, regardless of your challenge, engaging your people will be key. So how can this apply to you? Have you already started? Are you already on a continuous improvement journey and had successful improvements? Great. Keep that journey going. But let's expand that success by further engaging more of the organizations and teams. Consider TakeOn to support that program. The TakeOn conversations are deployed widely through the organization, and that allows the people to improve in their own workplace themselves. This is how I get the teams engaged, and I continue to shift the behaviors. In some cases similar to a daily or weekly stand-up meeting, but it's not, because it's not about download and a little bit of debate. Remember, we're focusing on dialogue, and it's about actual conversations versus metrics. Or are you considering, or not yet started, your own improvement journey? If you haven't began, then talk to one of your TakeOn partners. TakeOn targets your current challenges and allows them all to be involved. These conversations are powerful. I believe this has been the missing element. I have attempted and many times integrated it, for each customer time after time, but the reality is those had to be designed, and it was very time and labor intensive. But now there's a consistent way to have these conversations quickly and easily for the leaders, more importantly, to lead themselves. So we started with, we need to do more with less. But then we thought, maybe it's actually about do more with what you have. But actually, when I look back at my personal experience, the conversations and shifting the behaviors are repeatedly key to making these improvements stick. So, can you change your conversations to make the most of who you already are?
All right, people, that wraps that up, and I'd like to say thanks heaps to both Jez and Danielle for your participation. Guys, that was great. Absolutely brilliant. Listen, what I want you guys to be doing at the moment is to be thinking about what questions you want to ask. Type them in. All right. In the meantime, you can learn more about all of this at our website. That's www.takeon.biz, not www.takeon.co.uk, not www.takeon.com. It's takeon.biz. Why is that? Because it's all about the business. And you'll find all of our 40-plus themes listed there, plus a whole lot of the tips and tricks around the tools and the measurements that we like to use. For a closer look at some of the kind of conversations that we like to have, we really recommend that you join us at our LinkedIn group. It's a great opportunity to kind of get some sort of eye in terms of these are the things that we like to think about. These are the conversations that we like to start. LinkedIn.com/groups/TakeOn, and because this is how LinkedIn rolls, you've got to add a 2883185, or just search for us under groups. Right, okay, so you'll each receive an email in the next few days with a link to the recording of this session and to a tool. Jez, do you want to tell us about that tool?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we've been talking about the TakeOn toolkit and how it's dialogue-based, conversational-based. So what we've done is, if you've registered for this webinar, you'll get access to a free tool. It's a tool called Think Joined Up, and it's a conversation that I want you to take, and I want you to give it a crack with your team, or give it to a team within your business, and let's see how they get on. It's all about working better together and being joined up across the organization. It's really simple, easy to use guide. Take it and run with it and see how you get on.
Okay, so listen, we've got a great question from Baptiste. Now, a long one, so bear with me. He says, in your example of getting people within the organization to meet and discuss a problem and find a solution, how did you organize the gathering? Did you do it at the same time for everybody? Who was leading the conversations, whether internal leaders or external consultants? And how were the results of the discussions published and to whom? So, cheers.
Great. Well, I would say great question, Baptiste, but I need to say great questions. But I see what you've done there. You've asked about 8 within a couple of lines, but they're all really, really good questions. Let's take the first one. So how did you organize the gathering? That's actually a really, really important point about TakeOn. You see, TakeOn, I talked about these meetings being sort of 30, 40 minutes, and actually they're not extra meetings. This is not about a process of doing something else or doing something extra. So wherever possible, all we do is reshape existing meetings that are taking place within the system. So for our example in Malaysian Bank, these were meetings that were already taking place every week in the branches anyway. I think at the time they were calling them service meetings. So all we did was reshape that conversation and made at least half an hour of it very, very specific about topics that we wanted them to talk about. In terms of who was leading the conversations are led by team leaders. So these would be supervisors within a call center or a manager or assistant manager within a branch at that sort of level. The way that the sort of process works is that there are no external consultants within the business. This is why it's entirely driven from within. So run by managers with their teams. The TakeOn toolkit gives those managers all the tools and resources that they would need. So guides to lead a conversation, not scripts, guides. In terms of, just looking through your other questions, how were the results of the discussion published and to whom? Another really, really good question. So TakeOn comes with its own online social business collaboration platform. We call it the Internet, but that's the primary way that all results and all communication takes place across the business. So we connect managers and we connect people from high and low in the country who are all having the same conversation. Of course, lots of the powerful conversations take place outside these meetings, but when we get some good ideas, they're shared across that social business platform.
Okay, Baptiste, we're going to have to close things down for you there. But listen, if you've got any more questions, Jez would be more than happy to talk to you direct. So, we can carry that on offline. Question here from Elaine about references and topics. Listen, case studies and references to the stuff that we've referred to, of course, we'll send it through to you later. Another question here from Elaine. Did you have problems with team leaders or frontline managers taking over the dialogue? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, well, I would say yes, absolutely, but no, not really, is the actual answer to that question. I guess it's the same in any organizational system. You know, you've got some people at the top that you might call your stars, so 10 or 50, maybe 20% of people are really up for this stuff, and they're just incredibly empowered by the process. They will pick it up as easy as anything and just run with it. And at the same time, at the bottom of that sort of pile, you've got people that really resist it, that are not confident and that take a lot of convincing. And in the middle, you've got sort of 60, 70% of people that we might call bystanders, and the bystanders are basically sitting there and they're waiting to see how it catches on elsewhere in the business. One of the fundamental principles of TakeOn is focus on the stars and focus where you get in most traction. And that's how you start to lead transformation really, really quickly within the business by focusing on the positive stuff, just like that McKinsey research said, and not focusing on where it doesn't work. Confidence comes when they start to get a little bit of practice, and when all of a sudden they see other people, their peers at different parts of the organization, taking this stuff and making really, really great inroads. They get the confidence themselves to give it a crack, and bit by bit, momentum starts to build and confidence starts to build at the same time.
Okay, Danielle, here's one for you. Christiane talked about, and this refers, I think, back to the very beginning of the presentation, what internationally recognized standards does NASA work to? This is an interesting one for me as well. So tell me.
Well, considering it was the early 1990s, what I am going to talk to is NASA. So they had a lot of standards when I was there in the early 90s, but remember, the recognition of Lean and Six Sigma wasn't that apparent. But actually, it was more Six Sigma based. If you remember, like the spacecraft systems that I worked on specifically with Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they were low volume. So it was all about design of experiments, failure modes, effect analysis, and a lot of the risk analysis. Well, I was an engineer at the time, and those are actually classical systems engineering tools, but those are the same tools that have been packaged in the problem solving within Six Sigma. When you look at other standards, and I actually worked for a lot of the suppliers who supplied the systems to NASA even into the 2000s, into 2000 through 2010. We followed CMMI, which was a maturity model, and it's actually an improvement maturity model. Throughout all those years, there were various ISO quality standards. So we were following different portions of the quality standards as well. And yeah, that probably pretty much covers it without going into too much detail. But we look at CMMI, we look at ISO, so that covers, are we actually making maturity leaps with our improvements, and are we touching our quality?
Great. Okay. And Graham, one last question from you. Do you have any case studies from other UK companies available that you could see? Jez, we've got Carver.
Yeah, well, there's a few. And actually what I'd recommend you do, Graham, is get in touch with one of your TakeON partners in the UK, and they'll be able to share in much more detail some of the case studies that we've got from over there. But the answer to that question is absolutely yes. Some really successful ones, some really interesting ones, and I'm sure that the TakeON partners will be more than happy to share them with you.
Listen, you guys, you've been an absolutely fantastic audience, and I thank you very much for listening for as long as you have. Listen, as you sign out, we'd love it if you could fill out our exit survey, and we'll catch you again maybe in the new year for another seminar.
Will do. Good morning, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.